Greetings friends, Red Shadows is with you, the place where the darkest crimes of the former Soviet Union come to light. Today, I want to tell you one of the most terrible and at the same time mysterious criminal stories of the last years of the Soviet Union. This crime amazed even experienced investigators with its wild cruelty and strangeness. A story about terrible betrayal, greed, and one completely unique treasure: shampoo, vinegar, and the golden ring. Sounds like the beginning of some absurd joke, right? But in fact, this is not a joke. It is these three seemingly unrelated things that have become the main elements in solving a brutal murder, which put the police at a dead end for a long time. So, let's mentally move to June 1989 beyond the polar city of Vorkuta. The country is on the verge of huge changes. Everything is seething, everything is changing. But for the owner of one of the apartments on Lenin Street, time stopped forever. So what happened there? When the police arrived at the scene, they saw, well, let's say something completely out of the ordinary. The deceased Andrei Yun, chief engineer, is a man in good standing. But this was not what amazed the operatives. Imagine this smell: sharp, pungent, sweet, and sour. The whole apartment was literally flooded with apple shampoo and vinegar. The criminals clearly knew what they were doing. They tried to wash away everything to the last clue, to the last smell. And I must say, they almost succeeded. Even the bloodhounds, the best of the best, were powerless. A logical question: who could an ordinary respected engineer cross the road? To understand this, the investigators had to dig deeper into Andrei's personal life, and what they found there is just one continuous tragedy. Imagine, just 3 years before the murder, Andrei's life was destroyed to the ground. In the Tu-134 plane crash, he lost his closest ones, his wife and son. The grief was so unbearable that he decided to leave. He went to the taiga to take his own life, and he was saved by a random person, gamekeeper. It was he who found the words that made Andrei return to live on. At least for the sake of the old mother. Just think about it. A couple of simple but very correct phrases from the old forester literally pulled a man out of the other world. He has again found the purpose of taking care of his mother, and this makes his murder look even more monstrous and senseless. The man who fought so desperately for life was deprived of it. Okay, so what is the motive? Well, at first glance everything is banal. Robbery. Money and a considerable 12,000 rubles at that time disappeared from the apartment. He was saving up for a house in the south. But not only money was lost, something else is missing. A thing that was dearer to him than any money. It was a ring, but not an ordinary one. It was made of the rarest green Chinese gold with diamonds. The thing is unique, but its value was not only in metal. It was a gift from his father, whom Andrei had seen only once in his life. The only thread connecting him with his roots, with his family. You see, it was not just a decoration, but a relic. So, the investigation has a motive and one unique piece of evidence. It would seem that things should go well, but no. The investigation immediately went hard, following the wrong tracks. At first, they seized on the story about the sellers of the house from whom Andrei Yun wanted to buy a house, some Adlers, but it quickly turned out that this was just fiction. Such people do not exist. Okay, next in line is Stanislav Brezhnikov, the jealous husband of a woman with whom Yun once had a relationship. Seems to be classic. Motive. But then something completely wild happens. Brezhnikov is found dead. And yes, his murder was also solved in hot pursuit, but it turned out that it was just a drunken brawl that had nothing to do with Yun's case. Well, nothing to do with it at all. Imagine a whole tangle of events that simply took the investigation aside and took a lot of precious time. In general, the matter was in a dead end. But as it often happens in detective stories, one small detail, the same stolen thing, in the end decided everything. The green gold ring floated to the surface again. The information came from the criminal world, from an underground jeweler. A certain girl turned to him. She wanted to evaluate a very unusual ring. The jeweler remembered the thing, but he remembered something else even better. The peculiarity of her speech. It's just amazing. One single clue, a small speech defect, and the whole chain began to unravel. By this sign, the police quickly find the same girl. She turned out to be a certain Elena Perova. She, of course, was summoned for interrogation. She does not resist for a long time. She points to her boyfriend, Sergei Klimov. They take Klimov, and he, realizing that they have reached him, turns in the main organizer. And where is the main evidence? Where is the ring? During a search in Elena Perova's apartment, one of the policemen drew attention to an ordinary old rotary phone. Something was wrong with him. Intuition, experience. He spins the phone, and instead of a microphone, there is the same ring, rolled up and hidden. So, all the pieces on the board, the performers have been found. But the main question remains, who is this organizer? Who was he for Andrei Yun? And the answer to this question turned out to be the most terrible in this whole story. The organizer of all this was Vladimir Zhuk, and he was not a random person for Yun. Andrei considered him his friend, his friends. He trusted him, shared his innermost things, his dream of a house by the sea, and told him about his savings. And Vladimir Zhuk, he listened, nodded, and he himself saw in him not a person, but just an opportunity. Ability to close your debts. It wasn't just murder for profit, it was a cold-blooded, calculated betrayal. And now the whole picture of the crime became clear. Vladimir Zhuk is mired in debt. He came up with this whole story about house sellers in order to lure savings from Andrei Yun. He took the criminal Klimov as an assistant, and they just came to visit Andrei as acquaintances. He opened the door for them himself. And the moment he turned away to maybe put the kettle on, they struck the first blow. The case was solved, and of course, the question of punishment arose. Vladimir Zhuk, as an organizer, received 15 years. His assistant, Klimov, 12. While Elena Perova, a girl who tried to sell the ring, received 3 years for failure to report and aiding and abetting. That's the thirst for easy money. Turned out to be lost years for some, and for Andrei Yun, a life taken away. This story, of course, is very indicative of its time. The end of the 80s, the country is at a breakpoint. Old ideals are crumbling, and for some, money at any cost has become the new ideal. And you look at all this and think, eras change, scenery changes, but the nature of human greed seems to remain the same, doesn't it?